The forest was too quiet, and Daniel knew silence meant danger. His boots sank into damp earth as he moved carefully, the mist curling around the trees like smoke. The locals had warned him never to enter this place. They called it the Vale of Giants. But Daniel, a wanderer with little more than a pack and a stubborn streak, had decided to take the shortcut. That was when he heard it, the sound of a heavy body collapsing into the ground. The trees shook. Birds scattered. Daniel froze, gripping the small hunting knife at his belt. Then he saw her. She was huge, easily 3 times his height, her skin pale as stone and her long hair tangled with leaves. A giantess. She sat slumped against a tree, blood running down her arm from a jagged wound. Her chest rose and fell with labored breaths, and her golden eyes snapped open as she spotted him. Daniel's heart thundered. Every story he had heard said giants crushed men like insects, ate them, or enslaved them. He should have run. Instead, he stayed rooted, caught between terror and awe. The giantess growled, trying to rise, but her wound made her stumble back down. She cursed in a voice that shook the branches. Daniel, against every bit of reason, took a step closer. "You should stay back," she hissed. But Daniel saw more than a monster. He saw pain. She looked powerful, yes, but she was also vulnerable, and something in him refused to turn away. "You're strong," he said quietly. "And beautiful even now." The words slipped out before he could stop them. They were simple, polite, maybe even foolish, but the giantess went still. Her golden eyes widened. She stared at him not with rage but with shock, as though he had spoken a command in some sacred tongue. "You dare?" she whispered. Daniel swallowed hard. "I didn't mean anything, I just—" She pushed herself upright, towering over him even while bleeding. "No man speaks those words to a daughter of giants unless he accepts the duty. Unless he binds himself to her fate." "I don't know what you're talking about," Daniel said, panic rising. The giantess stepped closer, her shadow swallowing him. Her hand, large enough to crush him, pressed against his chest, not in violence but in claim. "You have spoken kindly," she said. "Now you are mine, and I will not let you run from the duty you have chosen." Daniel's knife slipped from his grip. His throat tightened. He had only wanted to help, to ease the fear in her eyes, yet now she looked at him with fierce certainty, as though his life had been rewritten in that single moment. The mist thickened, and Daniel realized with a sinking dread that he was no longer a free wanderer. He was bound by words he hadn't even understood, and the giantess had no intention of letting him escape. Daniel woke to the sound of rushing water and the smell of smoke. For a moment he thought he had dreamed everything. The wounded giantess, the claim she had laid on him, the word duty that made no sense to his ears. But when his eyes opened, reality struck. He was lying beneath the roots of a massive tree covered in a cloak of animal hide far too large for any human, and sitting nearby, her golden eyes fixed on him, was the giantess. She was tending a fire, one hand holding a branch that looked more like a log to him. Her wound was bandaged with strips of bark and vines. Even injured, she looked strong, dangerous, and untouchable. "You live," she said, her voice echoing like thunder through the clearing. Daniel sat up quickly. "Why am I still here? You could have killed me. Why drag me with you?" Her eyes narrowed. "You spoke. You bound yourself. A man's words are not empty in my people's law. You said I was strong and beautiful. That is the vow of a chosen one." Daniel almost laughed at the absurdity of it, but fear strangled the sound. It was just a compliment. Humans say things like that all the time. "It doesn't mean I owe you anything." But the giantess shook her head. "Among giants it means everything. Do you not understand, little man? By those words you claimed me, and I claimed you." Daniel rubbed his temples. "Claimed me? For what? What duty are you talking about?" The fire crackled between them. The giantess leaned forward, her shadow swallowing him whole. "The duty of protection. The duty of loyalty. The duty of standing beside me no matter the trial. You cannot walk away now. If you do, others will hunt you. They will say you abandoned your bond." Daniel's heart pounded. "That's madness. I never agreed to this." But her golden eyes softened for a moment, and Daniel saw something beneath her fierce words. Loneliness. Desperation. "My name is Kara," she said finally, "and whether you wish it or not, you are tied to me." Daniel stood pacing the small clearing. "I should leave. Find my way back to the villages. This is not my fight. You think the villagers will welcome you? Kara's lips curved into a bitter smile. They already saw you at my side. To them, you are my consort. They will fear you, hate you. They will not trust a man who speaks kindly to giants. Daniel froze. The memory hit him hard. The way the village hunters had stared when they saw him walking with Kara before she carried him into the forest. Their eyes were filled with terror and whispers. He realized she was right. His life had already changed. Kara rose, towering over him, her wound making her sway slightly. You do not yet understand, but you will. For now, you walk with me. My enemies follow my scent. If they find you alone, they will tear you apart. Stay with me and you may live. Daniel clenched his fists. And if I refuse? Her golden gaze burned into him. Then you die. The words hit harder than any blow. Daniel wanted to scream, to fight, to demand his freedom. But something in Kara's voice told him she wasn't lying. She wasn't threatening him out of cruelty. She was stating a truth carved into the laws of her kind. Hours passed as they traveled deeper into the forest. Daniel kept his distance, but Kara slowed her stride so he could keep up. Despite himself, he noticed she shielded him from danger. When a branch broke, she steadied it with her arm. When they crossed a river, she lifted him to keep him dry. It infuriated him. It confused him. Finally, as night fell, Daniel snapped. Why me? You're a giantess. You could have chosen anyone. Why hold me to this? Kara stopped, her expression unreadable. For the first time, her voice lost its thunder. It was quiet, heavy. Because no one else ever spoke to me like you did, she said. Not with fear. Not with scorn. You saw me, human, and those words cannot be taken back. Daniel's breath caught. He wanted to argue, to tell her it was all a mistake, but something in her tone silenced him. She wasn't binding him for power. She wasn't chaining him for cruelty. She was holding on to something fragile. Hope. Still, he could not accept it so easily. I'm not your kind. I'm not made for this, whatever this duty is. Kara stepped closer, lowering her massive face until her eyes were level with his. Then you will learn. And if you cannot, you will break. But either way, you are mine now. The fire in her voice sent a shiver through him. As Daniel lay awake later that night, listening to Kara's steady breaths as she slept beside their fire, he realized his life as a wanderer was over. His fate had been sealed by one foolish compliment, and tomorrow he would have to find out what being bound to a giantess truly meant. The next morning came with a cold mist clinging to the forest. Daniel woke stiff and sore, his back aching from the ground. He blinked blearily and found Kara already awake, crouched near the fire pit. Her large hands were busy sharpening a piece of stone into a weapon, the scraping sound echoing through the trees. You slept? She said without looking at him. Barely, Daniel muttered, rubbing his eyes. Hard to sleep when I don't know if I'll wake up as breakfast. Kara turned her head slowly, her golden eyes narrowing. I do not eat men. Daniel raised his hands. It was a joke, but she didn't laugh. Giants didn't seem to understand humor. Instead, she pushed the sharpened stone into the earth with a heavy thud. Today you learn the first duty. Daniel stiffened. The first what? Kara rose to her full height, towering above him like a moving wall of muscle and scars. My people test those who speak such words. Endurance, loyalty, courage. If you fail, you are broken. If you pass, you are bound. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. I never agreed to be tested. Her gaze hardened. Your words agreed for you. He wanted to argue, to scream that it wasn't fair, but deep down he already knew it was useless. Giants had their laws, and he had stepped into them without knowing. Kara led him deeper into the forest. The trees thinned until they reached a clearing, where massive stones jutted from the ground like ancient teeth. Strange carvings covered them, and Daniel felt a shiver crawl down his spine. It looked like a place of judgment. This is where the trials begin, Kara said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried something else, concern. She wanted him to succeed. Daniel crossed his arms. What happens if I fail? You die. The bluntness of her tone nearly made him collapse. Wonderful. No pressure at all. Kara motioned to the first stone, its surface slick with moss. Climb, reach the top before the shadow passes. Daniel stared at the stone. It rose twice his height, its sides smooth and unforgiving. You can't be serious. Climb, Kara repeated. Daniel cursed under his breath and grabbed for the stone. His fingers slipped immediately. He tried again, this time digging his boots into cracks. His arms strained, his breath quickened. Sweat rolled down his forehead as he clawed upward. Halfway up, his foot slipped and he nearly fell, but Kara's deep voice rumbled behind him. Do not stop. Show me you can endure. Something in her tone sparked a fire in his chest. Daniel gritted his teeth, pulled himself higher, and with one last heave, he rolled onto the top. His lungs burned, but the shadow of the trees had not yet crossed the stone. He had made it. Kara tilted her head. You do not break easily. Good. Daniel slid down the other side, panting. That's one. What's next? Her expression darkened. She led him to a circle of fire pits still smoldering from past use. Stand in the center. Do not move, no matter what you hear. Daniel frowned. That's it? Just stand there? Kara's lips curved in something that almost looked like a smile. Yes, stand and do not run. Confused but unwilling to argue, Daniel stepped into the circle. Kara lit the pits one by one until flames surrounded him. The heat licked at his skin, smoke burning his eyes. He wanted to cough to shield his face, but he forced himself still. Then came the voices, low whispers at first, then louder. He turned his head, but there was no one there. The fire seemed to carry them, weak man. You cannot protect her. Leave while you still can. The voices drilled into his skull, feeding his fear. Daniel clenched his fists. His knees shook, but he refused to move. He remembered Kara's words, do not run. Minutes stretched like hours. The fire roared, the voices screamed, but Daniel stayed rooted. Finally, the flames died, leaving only smoke and silence. Kara's gaze was fixed on him. You did not yield. Loyalty holds. Daniel staggered out, his throat raw. If this is your idea of loyalty, I'd hate to see courage. Her eyes glimmered. Then you will. She led him to a shallow pit filled with spears of stone jutting from the ground. Across it lay a rope bridge, frayed and swaying in the wind. Daniel stared, horror twisting in his stomach. No way, he said flatly. That thing will break if I breathe on it. Kara's voice dropped low. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward in spite of it. Daniel swallowed hard, then stepped onto the rope. It groaned under his weight. Each step made the bridge sway violently. The stone spears below gleamed like teeth waiting for him to fall. Halfway across, one of the ropes snapped. The bridge lurched, sending him sprawling. He clung desperately, his fingers screaming in pain. Daniel, Kara's voice boomed. Do not let go! Every muscle in his body burned. But something inside him refused to surrender. With a roar, he pulled himself back onto the planks and crawled inch by inch until he reached the far side. When he finally stood, shaking, Kara was there, her massive hand lowered, palm open. For a moment he thought she might mock him. Instead she nodded once. You are human, she said softly, but you are not weak. Daniel met her eyes, chest heaving. For the first time he saw respect there. Not just claim, not just law, but genuine respect. He had survived the trials. But deep down he knew they were only the beginning. The night sky stretched endless above the trees, stars glittering cold and distant. Daniel lay beside the dying fire, every muscle sore from the trials. His arms still burned from climbing, his throat was dry from smoke, and his hands trembled from the rope bridge, yet sleep wouldn't come. His mind replayed Kara's words again and again. You are not weak. He should have felt proud. Instead, he felt trapped. A sound cut through the quiet, a low horn echoing from the hills. Daniel sat up instantly, his chest tight. Kara was already awake, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She gripped her stone weapon and listened. What was that? Daniel whispered. Her jaw tightened. Hunters, my own kind. Fear spiked through him. They're after you? Her gaze shifted to him. After us. You are mine now, and they will see you as a prize. A man bound to a giantess is proof of strength. They will take you from me if they can. Daniel's mouth went dry. So I'm basically the trophy in all this. Kara stood, towering above him. Her voice carried no humor. You are more than that. But if they take you, they will break you to shame me. Daniel's stomach twisted. He didn't want any part of giant politics, yet here he was, stuck in it because of one foolish compliment. The horn sounded again, closer this time. Kara motioned sharply. Move, we go deeper. They ran through the forest. Kara's massive strides slowed so Daniel could keep up. Her breath came heavy, not from weakness, but from the wound still healing on her arm. She pressed on anyway, her focus unbroken. Branches whipped against Daniel's face, his legs burned, but fear drove him faster. Behind them, faint voices rose, deep and harsh, speaking in the tongue of giants. "They're gaining," Daniel panted. Kara glanced down at him, her jaw hard. "Then hold to me." Before he could argue, her huge hand swept him up, lifting him like a child. Daniel clutched at her arm as she sprinted, each stride shaking the ground. He hated feeling helpless, but he knew without her speed, he'd be caught in moments. They burst into a rocky gorge where moonlight spilled across jagged cliffs. Kara stopped, setting him down carefully. Her golden eyes scanned the dark. "They will come here," she said. "And when they do, you must not run." Daniel's heart hammered. "I'm not exactly built for fighting giants." "You are built for surviving," Kara replied. "And that is more dangerous than you know." Before Daniel could ask what she meant, shadows moved at the far end of the gorge. 3 figures stepped forward, each towering like Kara but broader, scarred, and carrying weapons of stone and iron. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, fixed on Kara and Daniel. The leader, a giant with a deep scar running across his face, pointed his axe toward her. "Kara," he growled, "you dishonor the clans by claiming a human. Give him to us, and we may let you live." Kara stood tall, her voice fierce. "He is mine. My words bound him and his trials proved him. You will not touch him." The giants laughed, the sound rolling like thunder. The scarred leader sneered. "A human is no mate, no warrior. He is nothing but weakness." Daniel felt his fists clench, though fear shook every part of him. Something inside him boiled at the insult. He had survived the trials. He had stood against fire and fear. Weakness? No. Kara planted her weapon into the ground, her voice ringing through the gorge. "He is mine. To take him, you must kill me." The scarred giant smirked. "Gladly." The hunters charged. The ground shook with their steps, their roars echoing. Daniel stumbled back, instinct screaming at him to hide. But Kara met them head-on, swinging her weapon in an arc that cracked against stone and sent sparks flying. The clash was brutal. Kara fought with raw fury, her wounded arm slowing her but not stopping her. Stone cracked against iron, her roar filling the gorge. Daniel's eyes darted desperately, searching for something he could do. He was small, fragile, but he refused to stand useless. He spotted a cluster of loose rocks on the cliffside. If he could bring them down, maybe he could shift the fight. Without thinking, Daniel scrambled up the slope, his hands scraping against the stone. Below, Kara locked weapons with the scarred giant, her teeth bared as the others circled her. She couldn't fight them all at once. Daniel reached the rocks and shoved with all his weight. They didn't budge at first, but he gritted his teeth and pushed harder. His body screamed in protest, but finally the stones tumbled down in a cascade. The smaller giant of the 3 shouted in surprise as the rocks crashed onto his legs, pinning him. Kara seized the moment, slamming her weapon into the chest of another, sending him sprawling. The scarred leader turned his gaze upward, spotting Daniel. His eyes burned with fury. "The human dares—" Before he could finish, Kara roared and struck him across the jaw, staggering him back. She loomed over him, her voice a growl. "He is not weak. He is mine." The leader spat blood, glaring at her. But the fight had shifted. 2 of his warriors were down and he was injured. With a final snarl, he signaled retreat. The hunters melted back into the forest, their threats echoing in the dark. "This is not the end, Kara. We will return, and when we do, your human will break." Silence fell over the gorge. Daniel slid down the rocks, panting. His arms shook, his knees nearly buckled, but he forced himself to stand tall. Kara looked at him, her chest heaving. For the first time, her expression softened into something more than respect. It was gratitude. "You risked yourself," she said quietly. "Why?" Daniel swallowed hard, meeting her gaze. "Because if I'm stuck in this duty, I'm not going to stand by and watch you fall. That's not who I am." For a long moment, Kara said nothing. Then slowly, she lowered her massive hand. Daniel placed his own into it, their sizes worlds apart. And in that simple touch, the bond between them deepened, no longer just duty, but choice. The following days were uneasy. Daniel and Kara traveled through hidden paths of the forest, always watching the shadows. The hunters' threats hung heavy over them, and every night Daniel wondered if more giants lurked nearby. Kara spoke little, but her silence was not cold. It was tense, as though she carried the weight of an unseen burden. On the fourth morning, their fears proved true. The horns came again, louder this time, echoing from all directions. Before Daniel could react, the ground trembled with dozens of heavy footsteps. Figures stepped from the trees, blocking every escape. Not 3 giants this time, an entire warband. At their head stood the scarred leader from before, his face twisted in triumph. "There is no running, Kara. You bring shame to your people, dragging a human like a pet. The council demands judgment. You will face the trial." Kara's jaw clenched, her weapon tight in her hand. "The council has no right. They have every right," the scarred giant interrupted, his voice booming. "Bring them both." Daniel felt rough hands like iron clamps seize him. He struggled, but it was useless. Kara roared, swinging her weapon, but even she was overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The two of them were dragged through the forest, deeper and deeper, until the trees gave way to a vast stone valley. At its heart stood an arena carved into the rock, ancient and towering. Pillars ringed its edges, etched with runes that glowed faintly in the dusk. Giant voices filled the air, dozens, maybe hundreds of them gathered to watch. Daniel's heart sank. It was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a spectacle. The giants shoved him into the center of the arena. Kara was forced beside him, her wrists bound in chains thicker than his arms. The crowd roared with excitement, the sound shaking the stone. From the highest seat, an elder giant with silver hair and a crown of bone rose. His voice thundered across the valley. "Kara of the Broken Clan, you bring a human into our law. By our traditions, his worth must be proven. If he fails, he dies, and you with him." Daniel felt his blood run cold. He looked at Kara. Her golden eyes burned with fury and fear, not for herself, but for him. "I will fight," she growled, straining against the chains. The elder shook his head. "No, the human must fight. His trials will show if he is worthy of your claim." The chains held Kara back as Daniel was pushed forward. His legs felt like lead. His voice cracked. "This is insane. I can't fight giants." The scarred leader smirked from the sidelines. "Then you will die quickly." A massive gate creaked open at the edge of the arena. From the shadows emerged his first opponent, a beast. Not a giant, but a creature bred for war. It looked like a wolf, but larger than a horse, its fangs dripping with saliva, its eyes burning red. The crowd roared again. Daniel's knees shook. He had no sword, no shield, only a crude spear thrust into his hands by a sneering guard. He glanced at Kara. Her eyes locked on his, fierce and desperate. "Survive!" she shouted over the noise. "You are more than you think." The beast lunged. Daniel rolled aside, barely avoiding its snapping jaws. His heart pounded like a drum. The spear shook in his hands as he scrambled to his feet. The wolf beast turned, snarling, its claws carving trenches into the dirt. Daniel forced himself to breathe. He couldn't win by strength. He had to use his mind. As the beast charged again, Daniel darted toward a fallen chain near the arena's edge. At the last second, he looped the chain around a pillar and held the other end. The beast leapt, its jaws wide, but Daniel sidestepped. The chain snapped taut around its neck. The creature thrashed, choking, pulling against the iron. The crowd howled in shock. Daniel seized the chance, driving the spear into its chest. The beast collapsed with a final growl. For a moment, silence fell. Then the arena erupted with thunderous cheers. Daniel staggered back, chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face. He looked at Kara. Her golden eyes glistened with pride, but the elder raised his hand. "The first trial is past. Now the second." Another gate opened. This time a giant stepped forward, towering, armored, carrying a club the size of a tree trunk. His eyes burned with hatred. Daniel's stomach dropped. A beast was one thing, but a giant? How could he even scratch him? The crowd roared as the giant advanced, each step shaking the ground. Daniel raised his spear, his hands trembling. Kara shouted from her chains, her voice breaking. "Remember, Daniel, courage is not the absence of fear." The giant swung his club with a roar. Daniel dove, the weapon smashing the earth where he had stood, splinters flying. Dust filled his lungs. He coughed, rolling to his feet. The giant laughed, a deep rumble. "This is your champion, Kara?" A trembling insect. Rage flared in Daniel's chest. He refused to be mocked again. He refused to be weak. He darted around the giant's leg, stabbing the spear at the joints. It barely pierced the armor, but the giant stumbled. Daniel pressed on, dodging blow after blow, each one strong enough to shatter stone. His body screamed with exhaustion, but he kept moving, using speed and wit over brute force. At last, he spotted it. The giant's ankle unarmored, exposed. With every ounce of strength left, Daniel thrust the spear deep. The giant roared in pain, collapsing to one knee. The arena shook with gasps and cries. Daniel stood panting, his spear dripping with blood. The elder's eyes gleamed with something between shock and respect. The second trial is past. The scarred leader snarled from the sidelines, his hands tight on his axe. His voice carried across the arena. This is not over. Let him face me, and I will crush him before you all. The crowd roared for more. The elder hesitated, then raised his hand. Then let it be so. The final trial shall be against the challenger himself. Daniel's chest tightened. The scarred giant stepped into the arena, his axe gleaming in the firelight, his eyes locked with Daniel's. And Kara, straining against her chains, cried out one last time. Daniel, don't break. Show them who you are. The arena thundered with shouts as the scarred leader stepped forward, his axe gleaming under the torchlight. He towered above Daniel, his muscles knotted with years of battle. Every step he took cracked the stone beneath him. The crowd chanted his name, their voices rising like a storm. Daniel's mouth was dry. His arms trembled as he gripped the spear, worn and chipped from the earlier fights. His body ached, his lungs burned, but his heart beat with defiance. He had survived beasts, fire, and a warrior giant. He could not, would not, fall now. The scarred leader sneered down at him. You are no champion. You are nothing but Kaira's weakness dressed as courage. Daniel's jaw tightened. Funny. For weakness, I've lasted longer than you expected. The giant's laugh boomed. Then let me end your little act. With terrifying speed, the axe swung. Daniel dove aside, the blade smashing the earth where he stood. Dust and shards of stone flew into the air. The force sent him rolling, his ribs aching. He scrambled up, clutching his spear. The scarred giant advanced, his grin cruel. Run, little human. Show them how fragile you truly are. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't match strength. One direct hit and he'd be crushed. But speed and wit were his weapons. The giant lunged again, the axe slicing the air. Daniel ducked low, darting between the giant's legs, jabbing the spear at the back of his knee. The tip scraped flesh, drawing blood. The giant roared, staggering but not falling. He swung backward with the haft of his axe, catching Daniel across the side. The blow flung him through the dirt, the air knocked from his lungs. Pain flared sharp and hot. He gasped, struggling to breathe. Daniel! Kara's voice boomed across the arena, breaking through the haze. Her golden eyes blazed with fire, her chains rattling as she fought them. Do not yield. Daniel groaned, pushing himself up. His vision blurred, but her words anchored him. He spat blood, wiped his mouth, and forced his legs to move. The scarred giant laughed. You crawl like an insect. End this farce. Daniel's eyes darted around. The arena floor was scattered with broken stone, splintered wood, and discarded chains. His mind sparked. He grabbed one of the loose chains, looping it quickly around the spear shaft. The scarred leader raised his axe high, preparing to cleave him in two. Daniel waited, heart hammering. At the last moment, he hurled the chain-wrapped spear toward the giant's wrist. The chain caught on the axe handle, tangling it mid-swing. The giant snarled, yanking to free it. That was Daniel's chance. He ran forward, darting up the weapon itself, climbing with desperate speed. The crowd gasped in shock as the tiny human scrambled up the massive axe toward the giant's arm. With a roar, Daniel drove his knife, his last weapon, into the scarred giant's shoulder. The blade sank deep into muscle. The giant bellowed in pain, stumbling. Daniel leapt down, landing hard but rolling to his feet. The scarred leader staggered, his axe slipping from his grip. The arena exploded with noise. Some cheered, others shouted in outrage. The elder giant raised his hand, silencing the crowd. His silver eyes fixed on Daniel. The human stands. The challenger falls. The trial is past. The scarred leader dropped to one knee, clutching his wound, his face twisted in fury. This is no victory. He is not one of us. The elder's voice thundered. Yet he has done what no other human has done. He faced the trials and did not break. The law is clear. Kara's claim stands. The chains holding Kara clattered to the ground. She surged forward, kneeling beside Daniel. Her massive hand cupped his back, steadying him. You fought, she whispered, her voice raw. You survived. You chose to stand even when you could have fled. Daniel looked up at her, sweat and blood streaking his face. I didn't do it for their law. I did it because I refused to be anyone's weakness. Yours or mine. For the first time, Kara's fierce expression softened into something fragile. You do not understand. Duty to my people was chains. But you turned it into choice. You gave me something I thought I had lost. Daniel blinked, confused. And what's that? Hope, she said simply. The crowd began to disperse, their judgment made. But Daniel knew it wasn't over. The scarred leader's glare promised vengeance. Still, as Kara lifted him gently, carrying him from the arena, Daniel felt something shift inside. What had begun as a trap, a duty forced upon him, was no longer chains around his neck. It was becoming something else. Something he was beginning to choose. As the torches of the arena faded behind them, Daniel realized that for the first time he wasn't just surviving. He was fighting for a place, a bond, and maybe even a future. And Kara, once his captor, now walked beside him not as his owner but as his equal. The forest felt different after the arena. The air was colder, sharper, carrying whispers of danger. Daniel sat by the fire, his ribs still sore from the scarred giant's blows, but his mind sharper than ever. He had survived trials meant to crush him. He had stood in an arena of monsters and walked out alive. Kara knelt across from him, feeding logs into the flames. Her golden eyes watched him quietly, not as a captor, not as someone bound by law, but as if she were seeing him for the first time. You should rest, she said softly. Daniel smirked tiredly. Every time I rest, someone tries to kill me. Doesn't seem to be working. For the first time, Kara almost smiled, but then her face grew serious. The council accepted you. You proved yourself. By law, you are free to walk away. No giant may claim you now. Daniel froze. The words struck harder than he expected. Free. After everything, after blood and fear, he could simply leave. And you? He asked carefully, her gaze lowered. If you go, I remain what I was before, an exile, hunted, alone. My claim gave me strength, but it also made me a target. Without you, I will fight alone until the end. Daniel stared into the fire. Part of him longed for freedom, to return to the life he knew before all this. A wanderer, unchained, untethered. But another part burned hotter than the flames. The thought of Kara walking into the shadows alone twisted something deep in his chest. He had seen her fight for him. He had seen her bleed for him. He had seen the loneliness in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. Freedom suddenly felt like abandonment. Kara, he said quietly, when you first said I was yours, I thought it was a prison. I thought you were chaining me to something I never wanted. Her head bowed slightly, shame flickering in her eyes. But now, Daniel continued, I understand. You weren't trying to trap me. You were afraid of being left behind. Her golden eyes lifted to his, wide and unguarded. And now? She whispered. Daniel stood, wincing from his bruises, and walked to her. He placed his small hand against hers, dwarfed by her size but steady all the same. Now, he said, I choose to stay. Not because of law, not because of duty, because I want to. Kara's breath hitched, her hand trembling beneath his. For a moment, the fierce warrior giantess looked fragile, as if she might break under the weight of his words. You would choose me? She asked, voice barely more than a whisper. Daniel's lips curved into a small, tired smile. I already did, the moment I refused to run. The fire crackled between them, but the silence was louder than the flames. Slowly, Kara lowered her massive hand, curling her fingers gently around his. It was not a grip of ownership this time, but of trust. Far in the distance, the scarred leader's horn echoed faintly across the mountains. He was still out there, still waiting. Their fight was not truly over, but for the first time Daniel didn't feel like prey. He felt like a partner. Kyra's voice returned, firmer now. If you walk with me, you walk into war. My enemies will never stop. They will hunt us both until the end. Daniel squeezed her hand. Then let them come. I've faced worse odds. She laughed softly, a sound like thunder rolling in the hills, but warmer than the fire itself. For the first time, the weight on her shoulders seemed lighter. That night, they did not speak of duty. They spoke of paths ahead, of plans, of hopes. Kara told him of her clan, of the day she was cast out. Daniel told her of the human villages, of the simple life he once knew. Two worlds once apart, now tangled by choice. When the dawn came, painting the forest in gold, Daniel rose beside her. He was no longer a wanderer lost in the wrong place. No longer a man trapped by words he hadn't meant. He was something more. Her ally, her partner, her equal. As Kara lifted her weapon and Daniel tightened the straps of his pack, they stood side by side, facing the horizon together. The world would not welcome them. Enemies would rise again. But whatever trials came next, Daniel knew one thing with unshakable certainty. He was no longer bound by duty. He was bound by choice, and that made him stronger than any giant law.